Welcome to the Longest Take podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Longest Take podcast. In today's episode, we are joined by Eric Vespe. Eric Vespe is a part of two of the greatest podcasts you could find online today, and that is The Spiel, which focuses on the works of Steven Spielberg and that connective tissue between every single guest, and the Kingcast, which, as you may guess, is focused on the work of Stephen King. Both of which are phenomenal podcasts, and I absolutely recommend you check them out. Like I said, they're some of the greatest podcasts that I listen to today. Please welcome Eric to today's episode. What are your top 5 favorite movies?
All right, so you're letterboxing me here.
Yep.
And can I just put a pin in this and say real quick how addictive that stuff is and how jealous I am of Letterboxd figuring that out? Because what's the coolest thing to do when you're talking to celebrities and just getting the nerd out about movies? You know, that's such a good introductory question, because you can find out a lot about somebody, about what their favorites are. So Jaws is the number one for sure, and beyond that I don't really have like a ranking. I just know that Jaws is my favorite, so I'm probably gonna pull what a lot of these much more famous people do on red carpets, who are like, oh, the first things that come to mind. But I can tell you that Jaws was the movie that I obsessed over as a kid, and it's kind of what showed me that there was more to movies than just like Disney cartoons and whatnot. So it showed me that there was an artistry there. That's where I was noticing the director and stuff for the first time. So that still remains one of my favorites. Casablanca, that was a very crucial movie. It was Casablanca and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance were the two movies that I saw that helped me love black and white movies, which isn't something that always happens. For movie geeks, a lot of times they tend to get locked into the movies they saw when they were growing up. But Casablanca is the one that I still return to over. It's just a perfect movie, perfect ending, perfect message, great gray area characters who ultimately do the right thing. So memorable, and it's always great to pull the gif up of the lady singing the French national anthem in the face of the Nazis, which we kind of need more and more in society these days.
Yep.
Not just the French national anthem, but
Right.
I'm gonna throw in a weird one, because every movie geek's gonna have that one movie that they feel like is theirs that might not be the most watched, but is the movie that they kind of claim as their own. And for me, that movie is it's an old movie called A Matter of Life and Death by Powell and Pressburger. And it have you seen Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks?
Mm-mm.
So it's a similar premise in which it starts with a young British RAF pilot. His plane is on flames. It's heading towards the coast of England, trying to come back from a World War II mission. And David Niven plays this pilot, thin mustache and all. And he's crashing. He's not going to make it. Everybody else in his crew is dead. And he maydays in. He calls, and a young American picks up the call. And Army, I don't know what her job is. She's a radio operator, I guess. Kim Novak, who would later go on and do all the Planet of the Apes movies. She's the young American woman, and they kind of fall in love as he's calling, telling her, "Hey, I'm coming in. Don't worry about it. I'm resigned to dying. It's totally fine." And they have this is the opening 5 minutes of the movie, is him calling in, plane on flames, gonna crash into the ocean, and not gonna make it back to shore. And he jumps out, and then later washes up on the beach, and he's okay. So it's somebody who was destined to die, and heaven realizes they missed somebody, and they send an angel down to come and collect him. But in the time between jumping and being missed, he falls in love with this woman that he had met over the radio. And then it becomes a trial in heaven on it's their clerical mistake of missing the guy, and can they then rob this woman of the love of her life, essentially. So it's this fantasy. It's shot in both black and white and Technicolor, but the real life stuff is Technicolor and the fantasy stuff is black and white. And it's such a wild choice that you would think that at the time they would do the opposite, like a Wizard of Oz.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Right. So it's this it's a beautiful movie. It's a romantic movie. There's a whole question of, is all this stuff in his head, and he's just has a traumatic brain injury from all this. Is it real? It's just this wonderful movie I love to introduce to people. So, and I'm so sorry you asked this very simple question to somebody who talks for a living now. So you're going to give these long-winded answers. I apologize.
No, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want. So we're good.
And I'm going to throw, because I've done this beautiful Casablanca, Jaws, all-time greats. I'm going to throw in one of my ultimate favorite movies to introduce to people for 4, and that's Sleepaway Camp.
Okay, yep. I've seen that one, yeah.
So there's something about this movie, if people haven't seen it, it's a movie, I believe it's 1983, so it's like kind of on the riding the wave that Jason made of these camp slashers in the 80s, and it's this just low budget, made with nothing movie, but it does the one thing that camp slashers never fucking do. Apologize, I don't know if we can curse on this.
No, yeah, you could. Yeah, no,
okay,
no
good.
biggie.
They never do is they have a camp with no kids in it. There's been precisely one Jason movie where there's actually been kids at the kids camp, right? And I don't mean teenagers. That doesn't count because they're all played by 24-year-olds anyway.
Yep.
And it focuses on the kids. The kids are the main characters of Sleepaway Camp, and there's just something about cheap, low-budget horror from the 80s, the early 80s. The film is grainy, but it looks so much better than top-notch horror today. And I just love the characters. The acting is so terrible, but it's so authentic. It's like they just get these real New England characters, and so you go from the little bullied, quiet girl to the the bitchy, mean girl. You get the counselor who's like, in love with the owner of the camp, who is like 80 fucking years older than she is. It is so weird and bizarre, and it, people know it for the ending. And if you don't know what the ending is, I highly recommend watching it before it's spoiled, because it is one of the most like, what the hell am I watching? Who thought this was a good idea? But it is a great idea kind of movie. So it's a great movie to introduce to people, just to watch their jaw hit the floor when they realize where it's going. Right. It's also an oddly progressive movie, wholly unintentionally, I think, but but it has been embraced by the LGBTQ community as something that was showing representation of a very complex issue at that time, which could also be a little bit problematic. There is a bit of a gender identity issue at the heart of this movie, and but it's something that I love that the queer community embraced. So I've given you 4. You asked for 5, right? All right, let me see. I'm looking around at the movie posters on my wall, because now I feel like whatever one I'm picking, I'm leaving out all my other favorites. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can tell you that the movie that probably had the most impact on me is because it's not only the first movie memory I have, it's the first memory I have in life, period, and that's Poltergeist. I remember I must have been, I think I tracked it down. It was a year and a half or 2 years old, and I woke up in my babysitter's lap in the apartment that my mom had. My single mom was raising me in, and I guess she was working a night shift or something, and she had like felt like an adult to me, but I'm sure she was, a 14-year-old next door neighbor or whatever. She was watching me, and I had fallen asleep, and she decided to watch Poltergeist, and I woke up when the caskets are coming up out of the ground, and the skeleton's arms are flailing, and Jo Beth Williams is screaming, and all that. So that's my first memory. So I'm gonna pick Poltergeist as my number 5. So. Yeah.
And do you think that was a traumatic experience, or it was just like, do you know if you were scared, or if it was just there was just something, I don't know, interesting about it at that age?
I mean, my memory is pretty much just seeing it and reacting to it, but I don't know in the moment, but I can tell you that, ever since then, I was a kid that was always seeking out how they made the movies.
Right.
So my guess is I probably was less traumatized and more fascinated. But that said, I also remember, being obsessed watching Raiders of the Lost Ark over and over again. But when you talked to my mom, she said that that every time I skinned my knee, I would lose my fucking mind if I saw blood of any kind, because I thought that meant my face was going to melt off. So,
jeez, yeah.
So obviously there was some trauma there, you know.
Yeah. There's always a little bit of that, yeah.
But that's what I mean, especially with 80s movies that, you know, they were geared. 80s family movies are geared to be, you know, generational trauma machines. That's just how it works. You don't watch Neverending Story and walk out okay at the end, you know.
Right.
Like, I don't care if they brought back Artax. Everybody, you know, who saw that scene was traumatized by it. So, but I think people forget kids like. I mean, it's a safe way to confront traumatic stuff. I feel like, you know, movies are a great venue for exploring and pushing those boundaries, but I say that as somebody who doesn't have kids yet. So
yeah. And when you talked about possibly being fascinated, so I have a 6-year-old, and whenever I'm watching horror, there are parts where I would notice him look at it, or he'll cover his ears like if he's scared, but he keeps looking because he's kind of scared, but he's more fascinated. It's almost like he's scared of the fact that this is something really new that he hasn't seen yet, and he's like, oh, what is it? Oh, wait. Yeah, what is this? You know, I love it. His mother,
that's a rite of passage too, especially if you're sneaking it. Like, I remember sneaking downstairs in that same apartment thing, and you know that I was traumatized by Poltergeist in. I remember sneaking downstairs. You know, must have been 4, 5, 6 ish, and my mom was watching what is a fairly innocuous movie now when you send people to find it. But she was watching this made-for-TV movie called Fortress. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's an Australian shot movie with an Australian cast, and it's all about these school kids and their young teacher who are kidnapped or chased across the Australian outback by convicts, but they're all wearing masks, and the masks are like Father Christmas or you know, an elf or a leprechaun or some shit. It's all that kind of stuff. And I remember doing the thing where I'm kind of watching from the top of the stairs, peeking through the little slat, moving my way down when I'm sure that, you know, my mom isn't going to see me, and like peeking over the couch, you know. But I don't know, it's you really want to get kids interested in this stuff. You got to make it a little dangerous and a little tempting, right?
Yeah. And I recently had on the newest Five Nights at Freddy's. I just rented it at home, and that's something where it was the same thing. And I feel like those movies are a good gateway horror for younger audiences. And
yeah, for sure.
I don't personally like them all that much, but like my son's mother, for instance, she was big into the games growing up, so it was like. But for me, while I'm, especially the second one, I'm like, wait, this is like Puppet Master, but for kids now.
Interesting. Yeah, I still haven't seen it yet. So
you haven't seen it? Okay.
No, it's totally fine. I've heard people don't like it, but
yeah, it's
totally
rough.
with you. Yeah, I'm totally with you. Like, there's that moment in the first movie where the damn thing like eats the kid in the shadow. Like, you see the shadow of the machine eating the idiot teenager or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, that's good. You know, there's different steps of introducing kids to horror kind of movies. I noticed there was one of the Wallace and Gromit movies. It was The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I think.
Yeah.
The one where it is, since it uses vegetables as bodies, it's like, it really is. I remember seeing that and going, you know, this is like Slasher 101 for 6 or 7-year-olds. It's getting everybody used to the cadence of slasher movies. It's getting the kids in a very safe way used to how things happen. There's always the jump scare, but instead of it being a corpse, it's a chewed up carrot or something, you know.
Yep.
So it's getting you used to the language of a storytelling like that. Yeah,
and I think that's definitely important, because, you know, I think that horror is one of those, like you even mentioned with Sleepaway Camp. I mean, there's a lot of these progressive ideas, and there's a lot that people put into these movies and get out of these movies that, you know, that reach you on like a personal level. You know, it's not just you know, carnage. You know, there's always a little bit. I feel like it's been such a good way for people to outlet their own personal trauma or kind of, you know, have catharsis with it. Something that you don't get in probably most any other genres. Because with horror, there's so many different subgenres that you're like, all right, which one can I kind of go into? There's so many to choose from.
It's also the one genre now that's still allowed to be dangerous. You know, it's like, you can't. Everything seems to be made for the being liked by the most amount of people, period. It's fed into the Netflix algorithm or whatever to be the most liked or the most watched thing. But like, I think that's why people like horror. I can't explain, any other reason why something like Longlegs made all the money it did. That's a weird, arty movie. I'm sure for everybody that went, 8 out of 10 people hated the movie, but like they were still drawn to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think they were drawn to a tone and drawn to this idea that something is dangerous and scary, because that's kind of what the marketing was. Even the Smile marketing, that was a little low budget, nothing movie with no famous people in it, and all it had was a really cool hook and a really cool trailer, and people were like, "Ooh, this is gonna give me a something that I don't usually get." So yeah, it's really weird. I love that genre can be that, and that people are still drawn to it. Because even in the worst of the post-pandemic, theater going world, where people were slowly coming back to the movies that were always guaranteed hits. It wasn't Marvel, it was low budget horror, and I think that there's a reason for that. I think people like not knowing what's coming. They can bitch and moan all they want whenever they see something like The Mist, for example, and go, that ending made me feel bad, ergo the movie equals bad, which is not right. That's a media literacy problem. But you know what, those movies that end and twist the knife, they make it dangerous when you go see the next one, because you're not guaranteed to know that the next one's going to end the way you want it. And there's just very few dramas or comedies or any other genre, musicals or whatever, that are willing to hit that same note, right? So
right. And Terrifier 3, I think, is a huge testament to that. The fact that they completely bypass the rating board to make it unrated and still yield such a big return with it. And I know
that's a good lesson. Like they'll, these things will chase them out. I mean, in the Ain't It Cool days, we were very adamant. We were very steadfast against the MPAA, because they were using their kind of puritanical system in this era to really punish movies and to really chop up movies and take films away from the filmmakers. And so that was one of the things that we did that I think was a good thing at Ain't It Cool, where we were always fighting against that and underlining the, because remember like South Park, in the South Park movie was a big kind of fuck you to the ratings board. And they even have Kyle's mom at one point go like, horrible, deplorable violence is okay, but don't say any naughty words. It's like that was kind of the little rebelling against the system moment for I'd say the 90s and aughts. But the rating system now is just, they've just kind of let loose, which is great. But it's I think people forget that just how kind of restrictive that was through the 80s and 90s. I mean, we keep talking about Friday the 13th in some offhand way for some reason, but if you go back and watch like the director's cut of any of those on Blu-ray, you just see what the ratings system, they were slicing and dicing those movies just as much as Jason was stacking up camp counselors, So
yeah, and even thinking about something like Kill Bill, just how like with the whole bloody affair, they got to show the blood this time, but to think that scene just had to be black and white for the rating board to be like, all right, you're good to go, you get the rating, whatever. It's just, I never thought about how they were utilizing that in such a negative way against the filmmakers. And I think that even with Eli Roth, he with his thing where he's trying to get more unrated horror out there in the theaters, I think that there's, we're trending in the right direction at the end of the day. I think
it's and you need that success, and that's why I was saying like follow the money. It's like they're always going to follow the money. The reason why the ratings were being used as a cudgel back then was because theaters wouldn't show unrated movies. But you know what, when they start making 80, 90, $100 million, they're going to start showing unrated movies. So
yep, absolutely. So you kind of mentioned Ain't It Cool News, but going back way to the beginning, I had read that you had your first interview at 14 with George Carlin. I'd love to know more about that and how that may or may not have inspired you to continue down that that path of interviewing folks.
Right. Well, this goes back. This is my freshman year of high school, and I knew that I wanted to have something to do with movies. whether it was going to be covering them, working on them. I'm no actor, that wasn't in the cards, but I've always been drawn to writing and drawn to reading and books and whatnot. So when I was in high school, you hit that moment where you go from here's everything that you have to do, and they set your schedule, they tell you what you're going to do, and then in high school they go, you have all that, and then you get 1 or 2 electives where you can just figure out something you want to do for fun. And we didn't have a film club in my school, but we did have journalism 101, and I wanted to do newspapers, so I'm like, oh, I'll do that. And they said, you can't jump right into newspaper. You have to do journalism 101 as a freshman. Then in your sophomore year, you can go to newspaper. But they did. The funny thing was journalism 101 shared a 2-room that was kind of joined, like a conjoined room with the newspaper office, which also doubled as the yearbook office because, school budgets and whatnot. But so I was, what that meant was I had really easy access to the people running the school newspaper. And so within, it must have been the first couple of months of my freshman year of high school, I was just talking with the editor of the school newspaper, who was, she felt like, again, kind of like an adult to me, but I was 14 and she was probably 16, right?
Right.
And she seemed really responsible, and her name was Kristen Fine, and she ended up going on and I think being like one of the editors of the UT newspaper, and she works at the Austin American Statesman now. So she took that track for real, right?
Yeah.
But I talked with her and I was like, listen, my stepdad got me tickets got us tickets to George Carlin. I was a big George Carlin fan. I'm like, would you want me to write a review of the experience of going to the show? And she said, I guess so, weirdo, it's like, if you want to, why not? And so I took that to mean, okay, I need to go. I need to get a quote from George Carlin. I need to do all these newspapers, because that's kind of what I'd been taught. Like, you're going to cover something, get a quote, get this. And we still hadn't interviewed anybody, by the way, for the high school. Like, usually we interview our classmates or whatever. I hadn't even done that by the time I went to the show. I saw the show, waited afterwards, and George Carlin's manager, Jerry Hamza, he came out on the stage after and greeted the 3 or 4 people that were hanging out, kind of fielding them off to say, all right, George isn't coming out. But I waited around and I just said, hey, can I get a quick interview with George Carlin so I can get a quote from my high school newspaper? And he said, no, George is tired. He did 2 shows today. It was one of those things. But he handed me his card and he said, but call my office, maybe we can work something out. And I said, okay, it's no pressure, it's just a high school newspaper. And he goes, that's why I think George might do it. Oh. And I said, really? Okay. And 2 weeks later, the phone rings, I pick it up, and it's hello, George Carlin, how are you? And I'll tell you how professional I was in this moment, giving you 2 examples. The first is when I listened back to this recording a few years ago, and it's horribly embarrassing, but he says, it's like ring, ring, hello. And then he goes, hi, this is George Carlin. How are you? There's no shit, 10 seconds of silence. And I go, hi. And the other example is that I didn't know how to record a phone call. We're talking landline days, baby. This isn't even, cell phone where you can have an app or something. I didn't even have a flip phone at this time. So what we did is I had a little micro cassette recorder that I got at Radio Shack with a little micro cassette tape in it, and my mom picked up the other phone line in the house at the same time I picked up mine, and she held the recorder up to the receiver so she could hear, record the conversation going on. But I told Carlin, like, right up front, like, hey, listen, this is my first interview ever, so I apologize if I suck at it or whatever. And he said, hey, don't worry about it. He said, if I've learned something in this life, it's that if you go through life and don't give a fuck, you find yourself a happier person.
I love that. And
that was the first quote that I got from George Carlin, which obviously couldn't go into my school newspaper. But I don't know. I think at that point I was kind of smitten with the idea that I could talk to these people that I idolized. And so I didn't really see like a grand plan of me, being the next Roger Ebert or, an e-news reporter or something. I didn't think I was ever going to do that, but I did love movies and I love the ability to interview people. So I did end up going on and working for the school newspaper. And while I was doing that, I I interviewed like David Prowse when he came in to town with the Star Wars convention. He was the guy that was in the suit for Darth Vader. I interviewed Mike Judge. I interviewed Robert Rodriguez and all these local filmmakers for my school paper. And it was around that time that I met Harry Knowles, who was starting, I think the website Ain't Cool News was maybe a few months old at this point, and he was just selling movie paper at these like little flea markets with his dad. So he was selling movie posters and lobby cards and stuff, and I would just hang out and I would buy stuff because I was a movie kid. And he was like, hey, I see that you're getting all these interviews and stuff for your high school newspaper. Do you want to write, do some interviews, for me on this website? And my response to that was, what's a website? We hadn't really figured that out in 96, 97. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Weird guy that sells me movie posters, and like I'll if I have another outlet to do it, I'll do it. And that was the birth of me starting writing on Ain't It Cool. And I'd go to film festivals and write up reviews of movies, and sometimes interview people and sometimes not. And kind of just for whatever reason got lucky to get a front row seat to this wild west era that was burgeoning, much to the chagrin of my actual newspaper teacher, who was she kept criticizing all my writing. And as we're talking junior year here, where the websites are starting to take off, and she's like, this isn't how you do it. I'm like, but I'm doing this on this website that's getting 4 million views. It's like, he's like, no, but you're writing this wrong. I'm like, but this is how I'm already succeeding at doing it. This other thing. We bumped heads quite a bit because I always like to write in my own voice and write as if I'm just having a conversation with somebody. That's always, it's maybe an influence from Stephen King or whatever, but that's just how he writes. And so, Ain't It Cool allowed me to write delving a little bit into the fictitious, because we were writing under pseudonyms, and I had a little bit of a character to play and whatnot. So that was the early years. That was the bridge. That's how interviewing George Carlin got me to Ain't It Cool. Was just, it gave me that little hit of dopamine of like, oh my God, I can't believe I just talked to somebody I idolize, and I want to do that again. So
right. So do you think that, like, if you talked to him on the phone and he was just a complete dickhead, do you think then you would have been like, you know what, fuck talking to celebrities, I want to do something else with my time?
He would have had to destroy me, down to my core. It would have had to have been like, you need to give this up, and this isn't for you. And like, it would have to be like a tinge of sadness, not just meanness, because then I probably would have just said fuck that guy and tried to, like, oh well, you don't even know what you're talking about, I'm gonna show you, kind of thing. But if he had like really been like more, I'm disappointed in you than I'm angry at you, then maybe I would have gone like, okay, I'll just go back to watching movies instead of talking about them.
That's
possibly,
great. But yeah, with your teacher, I mean, I can understand that, just like when you went from the silent films to the talkies or whatever, when you're going from one thing to the new one, and you're someone who spent your life in the old one, it just like that transitionary period must be super rough. And
trust me, all the we were this is the new wave of film journalism and online criticism, and now that's dying out too. Trust me, I was riding that wave, and that wave's crashed into the goddamn sand at this point. Trust me, that's why I'm a podcaster now instead of a blogger.
Right. So it's funny, you get to kind of experience that same change going from one thing to another. But going to Ain't It Cool News, you've mentioned that you've contributed to like growing the brand over time, and starting in the late 90s and going until 2017 or whatever. Just what was that transformation like throughout all those years, and just how did that grow you as what you were doing, and how do you think that ultimately, how were you contributing to the overall brand?
Well, I mean, I think it became pretty clear over time that there's a triangle at Ain't It Cool. There were essentially 3 lanes you could go in. You could go in, lean into the enthusiastic positivity. You could lean into the very smart but probably cutting criticism. That's like the Moriartys or the Mr. Beaks of that era. or you can just be in that unrestrained id that Harry Knowles was, right? Where he can, spend 8 pages talking about what he had for breakfast before a movie, or write something as like, I can't believe you would like ever be proud of a human being reading your Blade 2 review or your Charlie's Angels review, or his weird essay on the cheerleader from Heroes, which were all very big red flags that at the time just felt like, guys fucking around, and him trying to be, edgelordy. But apparently, we find out quite later that that was maybe signs that he actually believed a lot of the stuff he was writing. And I kind of fell in. I kind of became like the point of the pyramid that was like in between the cutting criticism and the unabashed joy of cinema that Harry had. And so I ended up occupying this weird middle ground that I think drew a lot of people in, because that's kind of where they were. And at the we were just making shit up as we went. It's like there was no roadmap of how this stuff would work. We just know that a community was forming around our writing, and the writing, we existed a little bit kind of like the Daily Show existed, where it was outside of news. We were news, but we were also, it was all driven by personality. It was more of a zine, I guess, if people are old enough to remember what the hell those are. But where we could be, rough around the edges. We could not have the most professional looking website. We could leave in hugely embarrassing typos and get things wrong and have to mea culpa it. It's like, it was this era where it was just, oddly enough, it kind of, and I really hate making the comparison, but it was like the proto-influencer thing, where people showed up for the personality more than the actual content, I guess. But the content was there, and I think what happened was I fully embraced the fact that I was very, green behind the ears on this, right? Like I one of the most popular things I ever did on that site was a series called A Movie a Day, where I said, I don't really have the breadth of knowledge of cinema that I want to have. And so I started a daily column where I watched a new movie that I had not seen every day and reviewed it. And I made it a little fun too. And sometimes I kind of wish that I would bring this back, but man, it's so much work. You don't realize how much of a marathon it is to write and review a movie every day until you actually try it. I dare you, if people go and listen to this going, oh my God, that's like, the worst, way to think about, like, it's so easy, watching movies is fun or whatever. I dare you, like, try it for 2 weeks. Just watch and review Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Do it, and see how you feel after 2 weeks. And I did it for about a year. But what I did to make it fun was I introduced this connecting mechanic, where I also wanted to kind of underline just how connected all film was. And so I started with a Paul Newman movie called Harper, which is a really great movie. And then I think I did, I went, okay, Paul Newman was in this one, so I did another Paul Newman after. Then I did the director of that movie, directed a movie I hadn't seen. And then the cinematographer of that movie shot a movie I hadn't seen. And I was able to connect movies from the silent era, foreign films, lots of film noir, and then I would jump into like a 2001 movie. Like it was always bridged, and so there's this connecting line between this one movie that I started with. You could draw it back. It's like the 7 or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right?
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and it made it a challenge, but it also forced me sometimes to be like, I want to get from X movie to Y movie. How do I figure that out? And what movies do I need to watch? And sometimes that meant I watched stuff that was the big movies. You see reactor channels are big things on YouTube these days. Sometimes I was watching Sound of Music for the first time, these giant movies. Sometimes I was watching movies that nobody'd ever heard of or thought twice about, that, some boring, family drama from 1982 that has fallen into obscurity for a reason, but I was still watching them and talking about them. And people really grabbed onto that, man. I don't know what it was. All I know that was, I've always been a very conversational person. I've always been a very positive person. And I think people were responding to that, because a lot of Ain't It Cool was the first one that hit it real big of all the movie news sites. And then there, a lot of sites kind of came up in its wake, and a lot of them were more snarky. They were more, trying to be the cool kids or the edgelordy kids, right? And I think people just, for the reputation that Ain't It Cool has of being like a home of the most vicious talkbacks and the biggest shit posters and all that stuff, there was still a community there that was really craving that positivity, I think. And then sites like Slash Film, I think, came up after Ain't It Cool and embraced that as well, and I think siphoned a lot of the people who didn't want to deal with the crazy hairy antics, but wanted that positivity. I think they fell there. So anyway, that was a very long response to your question, but that was kind of where my role there, where Moriarty was like the one, and still to this day, Drew McQueenie is one of the sharpest critical voices I think out there. He has a way of dissecting things that I think is incredible. Mr. Beeks is who's Jeremy Smith in real life. He's another incredible, insightful reviewer. And then you had people like me and Alan Cerny, who's Nordling, and Capone, who is Steve Procopi up in Chicago. We were kind of more the we just love cinema, and maybe we can't explain why, but we can tell you what we love, goddammit, kind of thing. So
right.
So yeah, I think that that was the biggest thing that I brought. And then there was a transition period in the mid-aughts where Drew was stepping away, Harry was getting burnout, and the site was going days without being updated. And I'm just like, guys, just let me do it. I'm sitting around doing nothing. Let me do it. And so for I'd say for the last 10 years or so of that site's existence, I was the primary force getting things done. I don't know. I think they gave me technically gave me a managing editor title, but nothing was run like a business there. It was just like, yeah, you do it, and then you can, it didn't come with any more money, I can tell you that. So
yeah, but right, yeah, that's it's so cool to kind of just see how things shape up and end up, even though didn't end in the best of ways, but I mean, just the experience itself, I think is something to really take away from that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's still around. Like the other thing that's my legacy at Ain't It Cool, I think is the holiday gift guides that I would do for the site.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that because we're almost 10 years. This is year 9 of me since I left Ain't It Cool amid Harry's sex pest stuff. So if you don't know about that, go do some Googling. You'll find some really gross things and find out why I left that site. But I forgot where I was going with it when I got sidetracked. What was I saying right before that? Where I'm like, I got to acknowledge the sex pest and stuff. Not me. I want that pointed out.
I think we were just talking about the, you were talking about the last.
Oh,
it's been 9 years. Yeah.
So I essentially was saying that I did the holiday gift guide, and somebody told me, Ain't It Cool resurrected the holiday gift guide this year, and I'm just like, the fuck they did, like that's my territory. And so I went back for the first time in God knows how long, and opened up the site, and it's so sad. And whoever they have running it, like, it looked for a second like Harry was gonna make a comeback and like try, he had been reclusive after all these years, and then he like kind of surfaced and was writing more, but God, man, I can't imagine that site gets any views anymore. It's not only outdated, it's just like it's toxic from everybody. Harry's too liberal to entice the MAGA audience, that might be the Kill Tonys, that like anti-establishment things, and his dastardly deeds are too gross for the liberals. So I have no idea what the hell that shit's gonna do. At some point I need to. I went through and I saved a bunch of my favorite pieces, but I don't know. At some point I'm gonna. I guess Authorly is something that Nordling was telling me I needed to look into. It's a way to save your work on this thing, because I can't imagine it's gonna be floating around forever.
Yeah. Everything.
That's like 20 years of my life almost. Yeah.
Yep. Everything's finite, especially when you have it on the internet like that. But yeah, that's 20 years basically, right, of being a part of that. That's crazy. That's a huge chunk of your life. And just kind of what was that like in 2017, just like the fallout of you wanted to leave because you're like, oh, fuck that, I don't want to be connected to that. But was there like a semblance of kind of feeling good about being free, or was it like a matter of, oh shit, now what do I do? You know?
Oh, I was scared to death, man. It's like I had a panic attack when I quit the site. But it's, you know, because this is something that's all I've ever known. You know, I was one of the lucky few that was able to make a living wage writing about movies, and it's like I wasn't guaranteed that. I didn't have a nest egg set up. You know, we write about movies online. We don't have savings. We didn't have a 401k. You know, so I was scared to death. I had a mortgage. I'd bought a house, you know, about 5 or 6 years prior to this, and I had no idea what I was going to do. Luckily I got kind of scooped up instantly by Rooster Teeth. That was a hell of it was a gratifying experience, because it felt like I took a stumble off of a high wire and not knowing if there was a net there, and there was, you know, that Rooster Teeth kind of came in. Ashley Jenkins over there brought me in to write for their they had a news section of the channel. If you know Rooster Teeth, you probably know them for their animated stuff, whether it's Red versus Blue or Ruby. That was like their main money makers, but they wanted to do like a news thing that was covering tech, gaming, you know, movies, all that stuff. So they brought me in to be the lead movie guy, and I felt like I was robbing them blind, to be honest, because they paid me like for once kind of what I felt like I was worth, and I was actually making legit real money for the first time in my life, and I kept they kept threatening to like start their own website that they wanted me to be kind of in charge of, and they just never did it. So pretty much all I was doing was writing copy for their on-air personalities to read for, and it was always just the movie stuff. So every day I had to essentially find the top 2 or 3 best movie news pieces and then write a couple of paragraphs for each for their on-air people to read. So I was, you know, I felt like I was doing a quarter of the work for triple the pay. And it ain't cool. I'm like, this is what I've been missing out on. And then, you know, quite quickly, that channel, it was called The Know, dissolved, and then I dissolved along with it. And then I found myself on the what do you call them? Just the freelance, you know, zone, which is the worst, you know, part of my career. That's definitely, when I look back on it, that was the most stressful. That's when I was like, you know, the kind of money you make as a freelancer is nothing. And so that was the time where I'm like, okay, well, if I can use this coupon here, I can get Totino's pizza rolls, and then that'll last me for 3 or 4 days. And you know, where I was having to heavily budget, you know, for just, you know, surviving life. And then the pandemic hit, which threw everything into the crazy whirlwind. But then that also led to the beginnings of the Kingcast, which ended up, you know, being, you know, a godsend and kind of pulled me out of that freelance hell. So yeah.
And so when the website, or, you know, when The Know kind of got dissolved, they let you go, or you were able to just leave? They had to let you go at that point?
Yeah, no, it was one of those very Office Space things where there was like all these levels to it. So Ashley left the channel, you know, and left the company right before, and she was like, all right, I'm taking off, you know, goodbye, good luck. And all the people that were taking over for, they had their meetings like, don't worry, this doesn't mean anything's changing, everybody's jobs are fine. And then it was like me and another guy were in the first round, like where they're like, hey, we have this meeting set up. It was about a month later. They're like, we have this meeting set up with HR. Do you want to come into the main office? And I was like, oh, HR's there. This isn't going to be a fun meeting. Yeah. And yeah, they laid me off there. They laid off one of the other writers, and then within 2 months or 3 months of me leaving, everybody else was gone and The Know was gone. And I think they moved. There were a couple of people there that they moved into other positions, but yeah, no, that was my second ever panic attack, was sitting in my car after that going, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Oh jeez.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, luckily, like I said, they paid me well, and I don't, you know, have a luxurious lifestyle. So it's like I'm like, okay, I can survive this for a bit. You know, I got on unemployment and I had a little bit saved up from that time, and you know, but that lasted about a year, and then, you know, I'm making money covering film festivals and writing stories for, you know, $75 a pop. You know, that's not gonna do much to pay rent and insurance and whatnot. So yeah, it's rough, man.
Yeah. And when you were a freelancer, I mean, what publications were you submitting those to? Because I know IGN, for instance, I think they offer like a little bit for someone to, you know, go on there and drop a review or something like that. Right. Is that kind of like what that process was like as a freelancer?
A bit. It was, yeah. I mean, it was a combination of people reaching out to me and me reaching out to people. You know, I got to say that the community was there whenever I left Ain't It Cool. Like, people came out of the woodwork to be like, okay, Collider, for instance, came out and said, we'll pay you $300 to look at all the James Bond movies and rank them, which, you know, $300 sounds like a lot for writing about James Bond, but when you realize that's rewatching 20 movies, that's a week's worth of work, you know? So, you know, I mean, I had nothing better to do, so I was totally happy there. So, you know, I'd kind of met all these people and knew a lot of these editors. So, you know, I did stuff for Slash Film. You know, I was able to reach out to these folks whenever I left, or was let go from Rooster Teeth. And, yeah, so I just kind of knew these people, and I reached out, told them that I was available, and they would send me assignments or they wouldn't. And, you know, and Sci-Fi Wire was a big one that for whatever reason I clicked with well enough to where they had me be their critical voice on the ground for local festivals like South by and whatnot, so South by Southwest. So yeah, Sci-Fi Wire was a big one. Playboy.com weirdly there was somebody there who was a fan of my work at Ain't It Cool and brought me in for a bunch of stuff, and they paid, you know, pretty good. You know, when I say pretty good, it's like, you know, if I'm thinking anything, $75 or over for a piece is good. You know, you hear a lot of these companies are trying to pay people like $15 a story and shit, and it's just, yeah, you know, it's like you wonder why the critical voices that are out there are what they are. You know, it's like, just, you know, it's people who are just young and hungry, or people who are rich and can afford to, you know, to not make any money, and they just want the soapbox. And when they, you know, those are the people you don't want to have the soapbox. that they're rich and bored and want it, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. That's it terrifies me, the thought of, you know, because I didn't go to college. I was already in my dream job, right? So I don't have really any other skills to fall back on, other than I've been doing this kind of thing for, you know, since I was, you know, like you said, 14, interviewing people. But, you know, that kind of, I was always interested in podcasting specifically because I think it fit my skills. I think I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, and I still believe this. But, you know, when you combine all my years of experience of interviewing people and just having these conversations, for whatever reason, I you know, I think I'm pretty good at it. I like it. So when you make it an interview show, like the Kingcast or the Spiel or whatever I've done here, like, I feel like that's where my talents are, and unfortunately it's like one of the rare places that are left for me to utilize it and be able to, you know, make a living. So
right. And speaking of the Spiel and the Kingcast, some of my most favorite podcasts, and rest in peace Scott Wampler, which, you know, it's sad going and hearing those older episodes when they come up, because you know, that was a year ago in May, or is it going on 2 years? Is it going on a year?
Going on 2 years.
It was 2 years.
May of 2024. Yeah, it'll be 2 years this May. Yeah, he just had his not here birthday on December 30th. So a bunch of friends of his, Luke, Tony, his roommates, and Mallory O'Mara and Becca and her husband, and all the, you know, all of Schultz and all of Scott's closest friends, we all watched Confess Fletch and had a text chain going on his birthday, just talking about him, because that was one of his favorites of, you know, the latest Fletch movie. He was a big Fletch fan, and he loved the John Hamm Fletch movie, and so we were watching it in his honor. So yeah,
I love that, and I really loved what Flanagan did, because I didn't see The Life of Chuck until this year, 2025, and it was funny seeing you too, like, in the background, but, you know, it was really nice to have that remembrance at the end there. But
Yeah, it was very, very nice.
And quick sidebar, so I have a Fangoria subscription. How do I get access to the article that you wrote? I think shortly after he had passed, you wrote a piece, right? You wrote a piece in it, and it was only available to get. I don't know if it's weird to ask about it, but I had approached them at a convention, and they didn't have that specific issue. Yeah.
The issue it must have been sold out. Then I wrote a memorial piece for Fangoria. That was just kind of going over my relationship with Scott, because the show that we have, the Kingcast, is on the Fangoria podcast network, and some of his best friends are, Phil Nobile Jr. at Fango, Meredith Borders, who's was an editor at Fango, and now she's editing that big book that's coming out. That's like kind of looking at the whole history of Fangoria that they crowdsourced, and like it went super popular. I'm so happy for her. These are legitimately great people, but this is like, the people he was closest to that weren't his family, right. Well, probably even closer than his family, actually, knowing Scott. We're all these folks. So, they approached me to talk about his passing and the origins of the Kingcast and what our working relationship was. And I think I don't remember too much about it. I remember, so I couldn't tell you like what is actually in the article, but I do remember that I knew that Scott wouldn't want me to like rose-colored glasses everything, because he was the guy that always liked to keep it real. So I'm in a lot of the talk, I can talk about how maybe it wasn't great sometimes when we would show up drunk to the recordings, or but how I do miss editing out his White Claw belches, and on our chats, so it's but that was the thing with Scott. Scott was a force of nature. That's just kind of, when you talk about people being characters and, having that staying power, that's something Wampler had. I don't know if I have it. I don't know if people will be affected in the same way when I pass, that aren't like my close friends and family, but he had a way of really connecting with people and just being his authentic, super horny, super stoned self, so that's just, and people respond to it, and then they miss it when it's gone, because you realize that more people are probably like me, that they're just, they're more guarded, and they, maybe don't let their freak flag fly as freely as he did, so I'm sure that's probably what was in the article. I'm sure I could dig up my Google Doc that I wrote that in, if you want to actually read the words. I'm sure that Meredith or whoever edited me at that point made me sound much better than the raw text, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of those things, right? Just when somebody's like that, there's an honesty to their personality, and a lot of people gravitate towards that. They love that. And I brought him on not even thinking about that aspect, and it turned out to be because the Kingcast was my idea. That was my baby that I was cultivating, and I was looking for a co-host because I knew I didn't really want to try to run solo on this. I didn't trust myself for it, for one, and for two, I needed somebody else to help me make it work. And I was drawn to Scott pretty immediately because we bonded over the Dark Tower. That was our thing that, we back before the movie came out, nobody had fucking read those books in the critical circles, in our like movie geek circles. So finding somebody who did, we were like, oh my God, it's so exciting. You know how things work now. Whenever there's a movie adaptation of something, there'll be people on staff at these websites that are like, okay, we know, like Flanagan has Carrie coming out. I'm sure that, Slash Film or, Collider or whoever, they have their people there going, okay, you need to read Carrie, the book Carrie now, and watch all the miniseries, watch the movies, watch the shitty sequel, the Rage Carrie 2, like get all this stuff ready because we're gonna need that stuff. So for editorial reasons later. So people do that in the industry. So before the Dark Tower movie came out, it was rare to find somebody that actually read those books. And if you're listening to this and you don't know Dark Tower, these are this weird, like every genre you can imagine, kitchen sink series that Stephen King has that ties everything that he's ever written together. This is the linchpin of every book, which all already exists in the shared universe. They're weird. They're westerns. They're fantasy. They're
one book can be a sweeping romance, the other's a hard sci-fi novel. It's like it's a little bit of everything, and because of that, it's a little schizophrenic and weird. But those who love it kind of make it their identity, and Scott and I both loved it. And so I remember talking with him, geeking out about Dark Tower stuff. So he was always a lead contender, but what I didn't factor in, something that I accidentally got good at when I brought him on and asked him to do the show, was when you're doing a podcast, you need to have that wild element. You need to have that really funny personality that'll ask a random question. And Scott, like, his talent was he could go from asking the most banal into like, hey, what was it like working with X kind of thing, to then going, okay, now let me tell you about this time I did heroin when I was 20 and roll this into this some crazy thing, and let me ask you this really random weird question that'll like get the interviewee off their back foot. And for whatever reason, that combo that we had together, where I was a little bit more the straight man to his zany character, people responded to it both in interviewing and the audience, and the Kingcast was a pretty immediate success, to the point where it could become our full-time jobs. So yeah,
that's awesome. And how did you meet Scott for him to even be one of those people that you could reach out to for it?
I think that, like a lot of people, I met Scott through Twitter first, where I noticed this guy his Twitter account's legendary. If you I think it's still up and running. So if you're listening to this and don't know who he is, just look up Scott Wampler on Twitter and just go back over the years. They're probably got a few days worth of reading that my boy lived on that social media network. But he was super talented at that. Very funny. He was a bully that bullied the bullies. It's like he always stood up for the right people. And when he passed, we found out like so many stories we never would have known of 3 a.m. Twitter DMs with random people he'd never met that were having a hard time that he helped them through and shit.
That's awesome.
He had a big heart, but he hid it very well under a very smart ass exterior. But he was very talented at that stuff. So I'm sure that's what grabbed my attention first. It's probably the first time I saw him talk about Dark Tower. And the first time we really hung out is he was writing for Birth Movies Death, and I was still at Ain't It Cool at this point. But we were both invited out to the Rogue One junket, which was at Skywalker Ranch. So we went to interview a bunch of people from Rogue One, and they didn't even show us the movie. We only watched the first 20 minutes at the Skywalker Ranch Theater. But we interviewed all the famous people. But Scott and I, we both live in Austin, so we were both on the same flight. And so we flew out and just kind of, what happens when you start the flight together, then you catch the cab together, then you catch he really wanted to go see all the Zodiac kill sites that he could, because they were putting us up in San Francisco. And they put us up at the same hotel that Sean Connery gets his haircut at in The Rock. He's getting his haircut out on the balcony, and then he does his big escape from this fancy, like old hotel in the middle of San Francisco. And that was the hotel we were staying at. And we kind of Google mapped it, and we're like, oh, where the Zodiac killer killed the cab driver is only like a mile walk that way. Like, why don't we just, hover? We're big guys. We're overweight people. We need the exercise. It's like, it'll be fine. It's a crisp, San Francisco morning. We can totally make it work. Not taking into account, that San Francisco, you're walking down hills and way up hills, and down hills. A mile in San Francisco is not like a mile anywhere else. And we were red and beat faced and huffing and puffing when we finally got to the place where the Zodiac murdered a cab driver. But we're standing there going, yep, it's just a street corner. Like, okay, we did all this for just that. And so that was our first adventure together, was just kind of walking the streets of San Francisco going, oh my God, there's another hill. And he's in his like dressed shoes, and because he's wearing his nice stuff, and we're all sweating through our clothes and going, oh my God, we fucked up, we made a mistake. So I think it's safe to say that I liked him, as Red says in the Shawshank Redemption, I liked him from the first time I met him. He's definitely a crazy character, and they're, obviously when you're working close with somebody, you're going to butt heads over time. And he had some very strong opinions. About 2/3 of them weren't great, and 1/3 of them were kind of masterpiece thoughts and ideas. And it took bouncing that between us to to make them work. So
yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I mean, like I said earlier, when you go back to those old episodes, it's bittersweet, because it's capturing what it was with him. He's kind of immortalized in those, in a sense, right? Like his voice is immortalized in.
And he's always his authentic self. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing, is that what makes it so bittersweet listening to that is that's not Scott putting on a performance. That's Scott, you know. It's like, so you're hearing him, and you know, I still had episodes when he passed. You know, we hadn't launched the Spiel yet. That was going to be our next show.
So he passed before you launched the Spiel? Really?
Yeah, we'd been working on it for about a year and a half, and we'd been recording for about a year before he left us. I said before he left, like he just got up and left a restaurant.
Right.
But yeah, when he passed away, we had I think we had 11 episodes of the Spiel recorded with us, and he was so excited about it, man. And we were, you know, it was a whole new podcast network, you know, Spectrovision, and you know, Elijah Wood was the one that brought us in, and he felt like, oh my God, we're making it. We're gonna make it. And then he didn't live to see it, you know, come up. But that meant that I think I had 3 episodes of the Kingcast in the can. We had the rest of the Shelbyville stuff, and Shelbyville was our RPG series that we did. We did our own Dungeons and Dragons adventure, where it was me, Scott, Mallory O'Mara, and Jacob Hall from Slash Film. He was our DM or our GM. And we had the Stephen King themed RPG thing that we did, and Scott was so hesitant about it, and it became quickly his favorite thing that we did, and he was really good at it. So we had a few episodes of that left, and that was kind of bittersweet because we were putting a final capper on that one. And I'd say about a week before he passed, we recorded the final episode of Shelbyville, and that's an episode where, you know, where there's like a button put on everything, you know, and they lived happily ever after kind of thing. And so that became fairly weird, you know, having to listen to my friend's voice at that point. But yeah, I mean, it hurts because it was him, you know, and the more you hear that stuff, the more you realize just how, again, there's just nobody like him. You know, I used a Hunter Thompson quote when he passed, you know, and when I was, you know, kind of airing my grief a little bit on social media, and I quoted this line that Hunter Thompson had about Gonzo, where, you know, I don't remember the exact quote now, but it was something about, you know, God's perfect mutant, you know, and that there's nobody that will ever be like him, or, you know, people can try to imitate that, but nobody can be authentically that guy. And, you know, he was just one of those personalities. So I'm with you, though. I do love that he had a chance to, you know, kind of document that stuff, because he was open about everything. Well, he was open about everything except for his age. For whatever reason, he was super embarrassed. I was one of like 4 people maybe that knew how old that guy was, and the only reason I knew was because I did the business paperwork, and I needed all of his details if he wanted to get a paycheck, and he wanted to get a paycheck. So he was very protective for whatever reason. It's not like it was weird. It's not like he was like, oh my God, he's secretly 60 years old or 50 years old or whatever. It's like, but no, he didn't want anybody to know how old he was. Other than that, he'll tell you, you know, about the size of his dick, and, you know, this weird sexual encounter he just had, or, you know, that time, you know, he'll talk openly about his heroin addiction in his 20s and his rehab process and how he's dealing with it, you know, in his adult life and all this stuff. Like, he was an open book except for his age.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But, you know, that's kind of perfectly Scott, right? Where he had these weird things that were just like, no, man, that's off limits. It's like, what, you, Mr. No Off Limits for anything? You know, that just kind of fed into the persona. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that him having all that out there, you know, for posterity and for people to hopefully discover, you know, well past his passing, you know, I think it's a good thing. And honestly, that gesture you mentioned that Flanagan did, you know, by dedicating the life of Chuck to Scott, you know, I have a feeling that's going to immortalize Scott in a way that even, you know, having 4.5 years of a podcast where you're a weekly show where you're talking about yourself for an hour every week or more, you know, we'll do. I think people will be confused, or not confused. I think people will look at that that ending and be intrigued. That's the word I was looking for, intrigued. And like, who was that guy? Why is this movie that is so perfectly about, somebody dying too young and the ripple effect that one person dying can have, to a whole universe of people, I think is oddly fitting, and it was super nice of Mike to do it. And I think it's going to grant Scott a little bit of immortality, because I do feel like The Life of Chuck wasn't a giant splash here, but the people who who saw it and love it, they kind of like Dark Tower, they make it their whole identity. I think it speaks to them on a real level. And so I think it'll be around for a while, which means Scott will be around for a while,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, The Life of Chuck was it was definitely my top 10 for just best movies that I saw in 2025. I absolutely love that. No bias, right?
Did you catch our voice? Yeah, I am biased. Did you catch? we have 2 cameos in it. Did you catch our voice cameo?
Yeah,
too?
yeah. It was on the radio at the hospital, right? You
That's
guys
right.
were talking about it. Yeah,
Karen Gillan's.
Yep.
That's what Mike first approached us to do. Was like, hey, I have this part in Life of Chuck where Karen Gillan's going to be listening to 2 NPR hosts, and I figured maybe you and Scott would want to do this, and we're like, 1, fuck yes, and 2, we're not actors, right?
Yeah. So,
and it's just like, yeah, just do it. So we just recorded it on Zencaster like we would record an episode of the show, and he sent the script, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be great. We're gonna have a couple of lines each, and that motherfucker, how Flanagan writes, so it's everybody, it was a page and a half of dialogue. And we were just like, oh man, like we're gonna do this. But we did it. We did 3 different takes of it. We did a serious, somber one. We did one where we're trying to be like, upbeat about things and like going like, this isn't all doom and gloom. So we did one where we're like, okay, we're gonna figure out these guys are just as bummed as everybody else is, talking about the world falling apart.
Yeah.
And they're beaten down and they're broken and they think it's inevitable. And then there's one version that, by the way, this isn't guided by Flanagan at all. He didn't give us direction. He just said, do what you want to do and we'll go from there. So we just decided we wanted to give him options. And so then we did one where it's like, we feel that, but we're trying to cover it up and try to be professional, the Walter Cronkite of it. Right. And then we did one which Scott kind of sprung on me in very Scott fashion. I thought we were done, and he goes, okay, and then we're gonna do one more for you, Mike, and here we're gonna do it all with our best Dino De Laurentiis accents. and that was us doing like, hey, this world is falling apart, right. Doing like the most offensive Italian accents you can imagine. And we sent all that to him, and he of course used the somber one in the movie, but he said that he loved the Italian version so much that he was going to play it for Karen Gillan, because we recorded it before they shot her scene, right? Mm-hmm. So the first time, this very serious movie, and she's, this woman's listening to these reporters talking about California falling into the ocean and shit, right? And they go ready in action, and they actually played the jokey Italian version. And she said she was so confused. I got to interview her after, for the Life of Chuck a press junket, yeah. And she was like, "Oh my God, that's you guys! I know, oh my God, that was so funny." And I was like, I thought I was going crazy. Like, why is he playing this stuff? So yeah, we get that voice cameo, and if you've seen Life of Chuck, you know that what. So much of it is that's introduced at the beginning has to be seeded later on. So I think it just made sense when we went to go visit Mike. He opened the doors and said, you can come visit us while we're shooting. And he's like, oh, and while you're here, we'll just put you in the movie. Yeah. And it kind of makes sense when you see the movie that we're sitting behind Tom Hiddleston, I'm sitting on a fountain, Wampler's standing up. My then girlfriend, now wife, Kelsey's with me, and we're talking. And if you watch the movie, you can see, it's very possible this character Chuck overheard our voices there at some point and then incorporated them into what you saw earlier, right?
Yeah. So
I'm trying to say that without any spoilers, but it made logical sense, and it also played to our vanity where we got to show up in the movie as well. So
yeah, and I think I remember you talking about how Scott didn't want to sit down; he wanted to stand up, right?
Yep. He for somebody who was super comfortable in his own skin, he hated being on camera. Didn't want, so there's very few photos. The one that you see everywhere after he died was this photo shoot that Austin Monthly, I think was the name of the magazine. They did a feature story on the Kingcast, and they hired a photographer and had us go out and take pictures with Pennywise balloons and an axe and stuff out in public. And so he has this really great goofy picture of Scott, holding his axe up menacingly. He's got his mohawk and he's wearing his glasses and he's making a goofy face and peeking around a tree, I think. And that was the picture we used for his memorial and everything. And it reminds me a little bit of the gag that's in From Dusk Till Dawn, where the Benny from Benny's World of Liquor at the beginning, the guy that's selling all the booze,
right,
and he gets shot and killed. You see like a newspaper article later about beloved local businessman or whatever, and he's like got a big fish in one hand and he's got his shirt off and he's hanging off of a ridiculous sign or something. So that reminds me of that, where Scott's final legacy, because he hated having pictures taken of him and being on camera, is that he gets his goofy axe photo as his remembrance. But yeah, no, he was very self-conscious about looking too big on camera, right? And he's like, if I sit down, it's only gonna show my gut. And the wardrobe that they tried to put Scott in, and I wrote about this in the magazine too, because he wrote up the set visit for Fangoria, but he only wrote he wrote about 2/3 of the article, and we recovered that after he passed, and I finished it out for him, right? Yeah. And so I told him, in that piece, I tell the story about going to the wardrobe lady, and the wardrobe was like, didn't like the shirt that Scott was wearing, and said, okay, well, I'm going to get you something. And the next morning when we showed up to shoot our cameo, she tried to put him in this like skin tight moo thing, and I've never seen that dude's face as red, and he's like, I'm not wearing this. He was so fucking pissed off. And she's like, well, you can't wear your shirt because Mike has said you can't have black. We don't want to have people wearing black in the scene. And that's pretty much all Scott wore. And so he said, okay, bet. And he walked out of the wardrobe thing, found Flanagan on set and said, hey, can I just wear this? He goes, yeah, that's fine. And he walked back and said, yeah, I'm just wearing my shit. And Mike says, it's okay. And but yeah, he did not want to. He was, for somebody who was very comfortable in his skin and didn't give a fuck what people thought. He gave a fuck about what people thought in some instances there, and he didn't want to look foolish there. So he wanted to make sure he was standing, and I didn't mind sitting down and letting my gut draw the eye. So
right, yeah, I love that. And switching gears a little bit, but I'm always glad to hear about Wampler, because I just know that especially for just these past few years, how close you two had gotten and everything, and how hard it was after the fact. But kind of staying on that same realm of Stephen King and Steven Spielberg, what were your origin stories for both of those guys?
Well, I told you the Spielberg one is the Poltergeist one, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean that makes the most sense, because that's my first memory. And we can talk about argue about the authorship of Poltergeist all day long. Right. That opens a whole other can of worms of is it a Tobe Hooper movie, is it a Steven Spielberg movie? I think the real story is somewhere in between those two things, but I think it's still mostly a Spielberg movie. So I'm going to claim that as my Spielberg origin story. But I'll expand on it a little bit, in that I told you that Jaws was like the thing that made me conscious of the director for the first time. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, Spielberg and Lucas were the two monsters, the monster, not as human beings, but monster filmmakers. Like, they were giant personalities. Their face, everybody knew their faces. They were as famous as their stars, right? People knew what George Lucas looked like, sounded like. They knew what Spielberg looked like and sounded like. That was rare for most directors. Most directors, you don't know, who they are really, what they look like. But I was hyper conscious of that, which made me hyper conscious of the art of filmmaking, and that made me think of the person making the choices of framing and blocking and when to cut and what the performances were crafted like. So Spielberg had a huge impact on me in that regards. And for Stephen King, my mom was a big Stephen King reader. And as a movie kid, I came to King through the movies. I'd watched Cujo, I'd watched Cat's Eye, Creep Show, Carrie, The Shining. I'd seen all that stuff at a young age because my parents didn't give a fuck about what I watched. But I remember I was in 6th grade, and I remember this because I remember specifically the classroom that I was in. And I decided that I pulled a book off of my mom's shelf, and that was the paperback of Cujo. And I said, I've seen this movie. This isn't a grown-up book, but since I've seen the movie, I can read the book and understand what's going on, because even if there are things I don't understand, I've seen the movie, so I know what the story is, right? And I remember taking the paperback and hiding it in my pencil box, which was just the right shape for the paperback of the book. I took all my pencils out and put Cujo in there. And so I would read that at school, like during recess while all the other kids were playing. I was in the corner reading Cujo. And for whatever fucking reason, as a kid, you get obsessive with stuff. And I said, okay, I read this. I like this. I'm going to read everything that Stephen King has written. And I just did that all throughout middle school and high school. I just read every single, if there was a King book out there that I hadn't read, I read it. So yeah, that's my origin story. And doing the show, we ask people, our guests, what their Stephen King origin stories are. Yep. And you would be surprised about how many of them are very similar. It's usually my mother was a reader. Occasionally it's the father, but almost always it's the mother of the person, like, was the one reading King. And yeah, just attracted by the covers or watched the movies and got in that way. Like it's a very common origin story, but it's fascinating. And when Stephen King himself came on the show, he said that was one of the most interesting things about the show to him that he had listened to was hearing how people kind of came to his work, and because it was almost always tied to something very emotional to them. Brian Fuller is a great example. If you don't know him, he's the creator of Hannibal and Pushing Daisies, and a very outspoken queer advocate. And he's come on the show to talk about his queer readings of Stephen King stuff and his connection to Stephen King. His answer to that origin story kind of spawned. He's been on the show multiple times to talk about queer readings of stuff, and it all stemmed from him, that origin story question, and him talking about seeing himself in Mark Petrie and seeing homoerotic undertones in this thing that maybe King didn't intend, but right. He picked that out as a young queer boy who was dealing it wasn't in an age where he could comfortably come out and express who he was, right? He wasn't growing up in that era, and he found some of himself in this character of this kid and projected a lot of that onto him. And that you get a lot of that stuff. You get these very personal connections to King's work, and I think that's the reason why the show's been able to have this 5+ year run, is that when people relate to King's stuff and they love King's stuff, it's not just that was fun. There's a deep personal connection there. And sometimes we'll have guests where it's just, I like that movie, but for the most part it's it's people who have a deep connection to something King, and I think that's what makes the show relevant and why people still follow along after all these years.
Yeah, and I love that, because it, and I think that's the secret sauce for any sort of interview platform type of podcast, is like you kind of want to have something that could be a connective tissue between each guest. You want there to be something that you're able to pull out that everybody relates to some capacity, right. And Stephen King is perfect for that. He's like one of the biggest. I hear that Dean Koontz sells more novels or something, but Stephen King is probably the most noticeable author of all time.
That's the deep Dean Koontz state talking. I don't believe
is that what it is? Yeah.
No, but yeah.
I believe you over it, I think, but
I love. No, I mean, I think it's actually true. I think Dean Koontz has outsold Stephen King, but I mean, he's had zero of the cultural impact that King has. Yeah. Man, it's like, which means something. It says something. And listen, I think Dean Koontz is fine for what he does. Mm-hmm. I like to slander him from time to time on the show.
You have
it's really
to.
Funny.
You have to, right? You're a King.
And
you're a King guy.
My dude keeps releasing videos where his hairpiece gets more and more outrageous, and it's like, you got to. He's like, he's as old as King is, but like King looks his age, right? And he embraces his age, and Dean Koontz is this shriveled old white guy that has a fucking Beatles mop on the top of his head. That's like, it's like, come on, my dude, you ain't fooling nobody with that.
Right.
Let's go. But yeah, we would joke about toilet papering Dean Koontz's house and stuff and all that. But it's more of it's a fun rivalry to force because King doesn't really, have any enemies that aren't Donald Trump, and we already, can talk about.
Yeah.
We already talk about how much Donald Trump sucks on a weekly basis anyway, so we don't need that. It's fun to create a fun one, not a real life one. So
yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And speaking of guests, so I recently had on Peter S. Hall and Paul Gandersman on my podcast, and then they were recently on for Man Finds Tape for the Kingcast, and they had talked about it a little bit, that they helped produce Seek and No Way Out, 2 short films that you co-wrote. So I would just love to hear more about it. It seems that you're partnering with Aaron Morgan for these projects. You've got another one coming. What is that creator side? How has that been? Because, this whole time you're part of this reporting thing, you're doing these interviews, you're interviewing creatives. You've got this creative side that, I don't get to see that often, right? And that you're still doing, you're still writing. Right. Just talk a little bit more about that. I'd love to know about your creativity and these projects of yours.
Sure. I mean, I tried my hand at screenwriting, and that was the thing. My best friend is Aaron Morgan, and he went to film school. His passion is to be a director, and when you see this guy on a set, like there's sometimes you see people in their natural habitat, and you go, this is what they're meant to do. And you see Aaron directing, you're like, he's meant to direct. It's like this is just something he's talented at. He's a problem solver. He has these abilities where it just feels like a fish in water, watching him do this thing. So like when he was in film school, we wrote a little vampire short film together that he made while he was in film school called Blind. I'm going to say that without being out of breath. Blind was the name of the short film because it was a blind date. And the whole premise of this, and it's very much a story that would come from somebody who was 20 or whatever writing at the time. But it's about a guy who we kind of establish as you see his creepy ass apartment. He's got little trinkets of bloody trinkets on the wall. It's like, oh my God, this guy's a serial killer. And he goes out on a blind date with this girl who's just this sweet, down to earth, super nice, super innocent girl. And they have this lovely date, and it's very funny. They have, they're kind of being hooked up by their funny friends. They really connect. And then you start to get worried for this girl, though, because we've seen this guy's apartment, and the twist of that is that she's a vampire and he's a vampire hunter, and all of his trinkets are the vampires that he has killed along the way. And so it's a very, for a short film, the success, you don't want a short film that feels like an episode of TV. A good short film to me is it's like a joke. It's a setup and a punchline, right?
Right.
And then what you do in that time period, and shorter the better, is all in service of that punchline. So we had this, it ends with this kind of crazy fight in an alley between this girl with she's got a blackout contact lenses and fangs, and he's got all these little weird ninja stars and shit that he fights with. But it ends with a really cool gag, which I've seen in a couple of movies now. But he breaks a bottle and shoves it in her neck, and then the blood spurts out of her neck and she dies. And so that was our first little experience. And I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I've wanted to, I think my mom has a story about how when kids are asked what they want to be in 3rd grade or whatever, they say astronaut or basketball player or whatever. And I said screenwriter. So, and I think, again, that goes back to the Spielberg of it all, is just like kind of being fascinated by how movies are run. And in my time at Ain't It Cool, I fell in love with being on movie sets. So I certainly, whether it's producing or writing, that definitely feels like something that I would be very into doing. And so, Aaron and I wrote that. We wrote another short film that Peter and Paul produced called No Way Out, which we did after our feature film fell apart. We got this, the biggest success and the biggest, sadness of the career is the first feature that we wrote was called The Home, and it was a horror film that took place in a nursing home. And we We shopped it around for years, and we finally got it set up. Somebody optioned it. They were pumping money to pre-production. We were getting out, the sets were being built. We'd hired K&B. We were casting it. We had Michelle Rodriguez was going to be like the lead nurse in this thing. And we had all these incredible Oscar-winning actors attached because it wasn't all this older cast. And so we had access. We got Louise Fletcher, we got Ed Asner, we got Louis Gossett Jr., we got oh God, who am I forgetting? For a minute we had Brian Cox on, in there, awesome. Which would have been major, and then he had to back out for something else, and we cast somebody else. Oh, we cast what the guy that was the sheriff in Critters, and he's been in No Country for Old Men. He was Tommy Lee Jones's dad in that. Oh, great character. Corbin is his last name. We had all these incredible character actors coming in, and they were contracted and cast, and then it's a very long, complicated story, but the short version is that Alex Jones did some sort of segment about how the Texas film legislature, or the legislature was funding these movies like Machete, who made it a joke. They released for Cinco de Mayo. They released we're coming for you. The Mexicans are coming for you. Trailer, and Alex Jones said this is the kind of movie that the Texas film incentives are funding. Right, that all anti-white, anti blah 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 blah, super Republican-y, conspiracy hat things, which isn't true. It was a joke, but nobody took it seriously, or too many people actually took it seriously, because then the Texas state legislature pulled the tax money incentives from the filming of Machete. And that completely destroyed us, because our producers, the money men, suddenly went, well, we can't shoot a movie here, in Texas where you built $100,000 worth of stages already. We can't shoot a movie there if there's a danger of the incentives, the tax incentives, being pulled even after filming, which is what happened there. So that threw everything into chaos, which then pushed schedules, and then suddenly people's schedules didn't work out. And we were less than a month, I think, away from filming that, and everything fell apart. And, when that happens, we discussed moving to Canada and discussed all this stuff. But when actor schedules started disappearing, we were losing actors, then like the whole thing unraveled, unfortunately. So Peter and Paul, were local producers and friends of ours. And in the wake of that, they're like, fuck it, let's all just produce. You have a lot of the, your people that you'd hired for this stuff just kind of sitting around doing nothing. Why don't we do a quick short film? So we just wrote this thing called No Way Out, which is, it's something that I wouldn't advise people do. But we decided we wanted to make something that was like tonally, that it was more about the tone than it was about any kind of sensical thing. So I think you can find it on YouTube if you want to watch it, but it's more of this up your ass, your head up the ass kind of horror poetry thing about a guy that's trying to escape this thing, and he's being chased by something, and you don't know what it is, and you don't know where he is, and he ends up ripping his own brain out and shoving it through a hole in the wall, and all this stuff. And it's less about making sense and more about it was an allegory for mental illness and
right.
and getting his true self out of this danger zone and all this stuff. Which is all great on paper, but the stuff that's the more successful, I think, are like I said, the setup and punchline short films. But I'm still proud of it, and I loved working with Peter and Paul, and they were extremely supportive of Aaron, and then more recently with Seek, which is something we did and kind of got butt fucked by the COVID epidemic, because we did this short film about a girl who stops at a roadside bathroom, and there's a little mischievous creature in there that wants to play games with her. And it's this cool, creepy, contained little horror short. And I think it turned out extremely well. And Peter and Paul kind of came in and pushed that, and we got into South by Southwest, and we were going to premiere at South by. And in March of 2020 was going to be our big premiere for that. And suddenly all the the decade that it's been since we had the home fall apart, and we were starting, the phone was starting to ring again. We were talking to new reps. We were talking all this stuff with the announcement of South by premiering our short film, and then COVID happened and completely took that off the table. So yeah, it does feel like a struggle, but it's been fun. And the latest thing that I'm working with Peter and Paul on something that they wrote, and I'm more as a advisor and producer capacity, I'd say, on that. It's a really fun project that Aaron is looking to direct next year. So, or I guess this year. We're technically in next year.
Yeah.
We have some like good producers and stuff. Yeah.
Is that one Everbrook, or is Everbrook a different thing?
No, Everbrook was the home was what Everbrook was the latest title on that one. So I am reworking that, though. I think we're gonna essentially, it was very novel at the time that we wrote it to have like kind of older people in a nursing home kind of movie, or older cast. That comes with a ton of hurdles that we discovered. Like, it becomes very hard to insure a movie like that. It very creatively limited us on what we could do with an elderly cast because we had a flood that ends that story. And we figured out really quickly that if we were going to put older people in water, it had to be, temperature regulated. It comes with all these other costs. So, Aaron and I have been talking recently about, we still, the horror aspect of what is in the home still hasn't been done. Even though there have been plenty of nursing home horror movies in the years since.
Even this, last year, I think there was that Pete Davidson home movie, and I think there was another one called The Home. I don't know if it was at a nursing home. I just know there were two The Homes last year.
There is a Pete Davidson The Home movie, which I haven't seen, and there's weird stuff with that. I'm not going to go as far as to accuse anybody of stealing anything, but that was a Dimension movie, and Dimension was going to be were the people that were in talks to distribute our movie. They had the script, and there's a lot of similarities, character names and stuff. I haven't brought myself to watch it yet. It doesn't behoove us, because the worst, even if they did wholesale steal all of our shit from our script, which I'm not saying they did, you don't want to be that person who hasn't made anything and saying, well, you actually stole my thing.
Right.
It's not gonna work out for anybody. So yeah, I've purposefully not seen that thing. I've had friends that seen it and said, oh, you don't have to worry about it, it's not like what you wrote. And I've had friends that go, yeah, it's pretty close to what you wrote. So I don't know. But yeah, no, we're talking about retooling it and taking a lot of the horror elements that are really unique and fun to that thing and putting it into something else. So I'm working on that right now. There was a revenge thing that I wrote with Aaron called Broken Bones that I fucking love, and it's a little bit more. It's just like it's like Guillermo del Toro making John Wick. Imagine. Oh,
that's
dope.
That's a dope log line right there, or whatever you want to call it.
So very heavily inspired by Korean revenge movies and that kind of thing. That one I'm very proud of, and I really like it. And I'm in the middle of a rewrite there. We'll see if anything ever comes to that. But Aaron's focused on this other project that Peter and Paul wrote, and it's a really fun thing, and we have some cast in place, and things are moving where, to the degree where if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen sooner than later. So
that's dope. And it's a feature, right? Is this Aaron's first feature?
It's a feature film. Yeah, it'll finally be his first feature. Yeah. And that after 20 years of making short films, eventually you got to make the longer one, right? So
yeah, that's the nature of the
Peter
business.
And Paul killed it. Like, I got to say that the script that they've written is super fun, and I think Aaron, his guidance on it, I've seen it evolve over multiple drafts, and it's a really cool concept. It's like a horror comedy isn't the words you want to say to investors, but to people who actually like movies, it's a very funny movie that has a lot of gore in it. So it's a really cool idea, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait for that, especially because Peter and Paul are involved, and just what they were able to do with Rustic Films recently. I just I can't imagine how creative this one's going to be. I love that. And you said you're like just kind of like a producer or advisor on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what my ultimate role will be. Ideally, I'd love to help shepherd it. I've given notes and helped with cast and stuff. So I assume that at a certain point, the discussion will be there. But it's also something we learned, with our failed projects, is that the more people that you attach to a project before it's set up, the harder it is to get it made. Mm-hmm. So we're that'll be totally up to the money producers, but I'll do my part if they allow me to come in and be a producer on this one. So
right. And that's something I kind of noticed with especially the local film community and in the horror spaces. Like, they'll post about this movie and they'll post that they have like all these, horror royalty actors or actresses a part of it. But then I don't hear anything about that project ever again. They're like, oh, we got so-and-so on this. This is happening. And then it's just gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing for indie movies in particular, because the money is so scared in indie financing. It really does, it literally could be thrown off by a random horror movie not opening well, 2 weeks before you're supposed to start shooting. Then they get scared off, go, oh, people don't want horror anymore, they don't want this, or this actor that you have was in this thing that only got X reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. That shit can go, it's so it falters. But I mean, it's an industry problem on the whole. I mean, you go back 5 years and look at any random Deadline story, and it'll likely be about a movie that never happened, and it'll be George Clooney cast in this, or Brad Pitt's this. It's like that happens to the biggest of the big stars too. But it is really weird when it happens to the indie space, because the genre, especially with genre stuff, because the genre fans are so hardcore about that stuff. Because we had some production design work, like production drawings and stuff done by Weta. The folks that did Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. They did some incredible production art for the home, and we released a few of those whenever we were announcing our casting. And there's one image that is in particular that's a fucking killer image. We had a character, her name was Gertie. Louise Fletcher was going to play her in the movie, Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Mm-hmm. But it's a role that I'd kind of written with Zelda Rubinstein in mind for who played Tangina in Poltergeist. Yep. But it's this old woman who's has a psychotic break, and she's a doll collector, and she has all these creepy porcelain dolls, and part of the horror of the home is can take over things within that thing. So the artwork, and you can find it out there, is Gertie cradling one of these dolls, as another one is walking up to somebody else and leaving bloody footprints behind it, and it's got these glowing eyes, and somebody messaged us that they had that tattooed on them. I'm like, this movie didn't even happen.
Oh wow.
And yet there is somebody out there, I don't know if they've regretted it since, going, I'm going to be early on this machine, and then the damn thing never happened. But that's how passionate they are. They see something really cool like that, and they grab onto it, and they it is a killer image, man. It's something that you could be like a horror book cover. It's that quality. So
yeah, I love that. So I definitely look forward to the way you're able to rework that in the future. But
we have some good ideas, and the producers that Aaron's working with on the project with Peter and Paul are very hungry for other things. So I think we're gonna take some of the stuff again that worked, and it'd just be a shame to let disappear into a gorge forever, and completely rework it into a different story. So I think that's the next step, and that's the 2026 goals, is to get that script done. Because ultimately, like, I love the process of writing, and I don't know if I have a talent for a novel, but I feel like I understand, after having gone through this process a few times now, working and reworking and reworking and honing a script. I feel like I kind of understand it. So it'd be nice to get a shot to actually have one of these happen. So that's definitely the goal. I mean, for all I know, maybe people will watch and go, nope, not stick to podcasting, buddy. But but I definitely have the draw. And it's easy to get beat down too when you put in all this work, because I mean the home falling apart was
that was years of work, leading into that, and all to then just be like, well, you had your shot and that's it. Then it just seemed like a dead project, and nobody wants to touch a dead project. So
was that your third panic attack, or was that like an okay? Was that
No,
did you handle that okay?
I didn't. Because here's the thing, like nothing. There is no finality in Hollywood. I've discovered. So
right, true.
When the home fell apart, it was okay. We're taking a break, 2-week break. We will gather forces. We're coming back in 2 weeks to discuss stuff. And then actors started missing actor windows. And it's like, don't worry, we're going to recast it. Then 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, and you go, oh, that thing died that day. And nobody said. So I didn't have that it's not that finality of me writing I'm leaving Ain't It Cool after 20 years piece, or me stepping into the HR offices at Rooster Teeth and being told like, cool, thanks for your year here, hope you've saved up enough to weather whatever's coming next. That's listen, that's they were much more professional about it than that, but that's the way it felt to me, right? So
absolutely.
So those are just instant. I think because I'm a fairly level-headed guy. When something happens, my instinct is to go into problem-solving mode, less like splashing around and drowning in the weight of it, right? But I think it is really the difference of just this last-minute thing, this rug pull of it that can trigger that. So it's rare that it happens, but and it didn't happen there, which was a giant career hit, even more so probably than being laid off at Rooster Teeth. But there was a suddenness to it that was the difference, I think. Yeah,
and like you said, there's really no finality in Hollywood. There's always that potential of it coming back. And I also don't want to make light of panic attacks, because I will say in the last couple years I've had more than I've ever had in my entire life. So I don't want to act like I'm making light of it or anything.
And it's not something you can choose, right? It's not something you can choose to happen or not happen.
And it really sucks when it happens. It's a terrible feeling. It sucks.
It does. It feels like to me like there was I don't know. You see those like water parks or whatever where they hold all the water back and then they release it all at once to make a big wave. That's what it feels like for a panic attack. It's like somebody moved that barrier and suddenly you're just flooded of every insecurity, every worry, every possible thing that could go wrong hit you at once like a fucking tidal wave. It's rough. I don't recommend it, but also, like I said, you can't really choose it. So
right. Yeah, just make sure you have a good support system or way of kind of riding that wave, because that's all it is. It's a wave that you can't stop. You just got to ride it out. But at the end of these interviews, I start them with everybody the same way, with a copying letterbox, right? And then I end it the same way, where I ask the person, where do you see yourself in 5 years, personally or professionally?
Well, kind of both. I got married this past year, and we want to start a family. So I would assume in 5 years I'll have a kid or two. I don't honestly, the whole concept of turning into Mr. Mom is kind of appealing to me. So maybe I'll disappear and just raise some kids. I'll pull a Rick Moranis. I don't know. Maybe. I can't imagine. I don't know if the Kingcast will still be a thing in 5 years. We've talked a lot about the Wampler of it, and when he left, that completely changed the identity. But he was wanting to end the show, and just he was kind of done talking about Stephen King. I wasn't, but I wasn't going to continue on without him. And when he passed, I kind of had to really examine what I wanted to do, and. Just the support from the community. I brought in a bunch of guest co-hosts, of friends and stuff that we've made along the way to kind of get me through. And then, I kind of ended up falling on this decision to continue the show, but in a way that wouldn't try to just replace Scott. I didn't want to bring in somebody that was another jokester or whatever. Right. And so the identity of the show changed a little bit, because I ended up picking a guy named Anthony Bresnikan, who's an incredibly well respected film reporter. He's worked at real publications. I think he's doing stuff at Esquire now. But he's worked at Entertainment Weekly. He's worked at, every prestigious thing. He's a real deal guy. He's the guy that you bring in to do real good profiles on your big celebrities kind of thing. So, but he's a little bit more like my vibe, where we're a little bit more well researched. We're a little bit more analytical and passionate in that way. He's not the chaos engine, but having the guest co-hosts, even the ones that were tapping into some of that Wampler energy, it just didn't feel right to try to replicate that with him. And it felt like if I was going to continue the show, I was going to continue it in a new form, right? And that's what it's been. I've been very happy with it. We've gotten some incredible guests. The show's like more popular than ever in terms of being able to actually get really good people on. We're the publicists understand what we are now, so we have them bringing us good people instead of us having to hunt down every guest. And we're in a good spot with the show, but I don't know if it lasts 5 years. I don't, I could do another 5 years talking about Stephen King. I don't know. Ideally, I'm either doing another hit interview podcast of some sort if I get tired of King or tired of Spielberg, or or I'm family man first and foremost, or I'm some combo of both, or I'm producing more movies with Aaron and writing some stuff there. Honestly, I don't know. Like if I could choose my ideal, it'd probably be a little bit of all those avenues,
right?
Where I could write my screenplays and do my weekly podcast, and because this is different from something I was running into during the Ain't It Cool days when the home was gathering traction. Is it became very perilous to be a critic at the same time as having your own project through development, because then it's like, if you don't like a movie, can you be honest about that and potentially burn a bridge with a producer, an actor, something like that, or the inverse of that is like, I like most of what I see. I'm not a negative critic. I can usually find something nice to say about something. But the inverse of that is, can you trust a critic who's trying to make their own things? And I've known some critics who have who have written some questionable material because they were trying to get their own thing made. And it's like, I don't think I would ever quite be that person, but then you also you have to have trust in a critic, and I don't know if you can trust somebody that's also trying to make their own thing happen, because that just adds another variable that isn't what an audience member is. Audiences turn to critics, so they can, have an unbiased opinion on a movie, right? Am I going to like this? Do you think I'm going to like this?
Yeah.
Is this a critic who I tend to agree with? Even opinion's subjective, but you can find critics that you mostly agree with or go to the movies for the same reason you go to the movies, that like the same things you like. It's not really fair to your audience in either way if you're still being a critic and trying to make your own movies, right? So but with an interview show like this, with the Kingcast, I'm not really a critic. I kind of am. I do analyze film in that way. I analyze adaptations and stuff, but it's not the same thing as reviewing something that's coming out, right? So I feel like you could do both. I mean, ideally, this year, I get to help produce this thing for Peter and Paul and Aaron, and that just starts a chain of us working together in that capacity. And I do love interviewing people, man. I do love talking to folks. I love connecting with folks in this long form process that podcast allows. And if there's an audience for that, I'd love to keep doing that. There's been an incredible community that's built up with the Kingcast over the last, this will be year 6 coming up. And I kind of treasure that, and it's not something everybody gets to have, and I'm very lucky for it. So I'm hoping, again, I'm sorry you asked a very simple question to somebody who talks for a living, so I'm going to give you an 8-minute answer on it. But my ultimate dream was maybe a little bit of all those, where I get to be Mr. Mom during the morning, and then I get to record my podcast in the afternoon, and And then, in the evenings, I get to do some more writing, or I get to, help. I can imagine if the filmmaking stuff takes off for real, and this, it's not just an indie movie that I'm helping friends out with, here or there, that the podcasting stuff's probably going to have to be, put aside, unless it can be big enough that a system is in place where all you have to do is show up for it. But that's
right.
As somebody who runs their own podcast, that this thing that we're doing right now, this is the fun part, and it's like a tenth of what the work is of actually doing a podcast. So there's the editing, there's the file management, there's the uploading, there's the summary description writing, there's a huge amount of work that goes into making a podcast, that if that part of it is taken out of my hands, then I think that can continue if I end up, working as a producer or writer. But also the realistic side of me knows if I'm trying to juggle a family and a career, it's going to have to be one of the two, I assume. But
yeah.
But we'll see.
It's definitely harder when you throw a kid into the mix. It kind of, it could complicate it, but also, the great thing about kids and having a kid is just for me, it was just naturally just a part of life. It wasn't like a burden. It wasn't something that I added on to everything else. It was just already a part of it, and it was so easy to adapt because nothing else is as important. So,
that's what I hear. So, and it's something that we both, when you start going out with somebody, you have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's like the kids thing is the important one. And if you don't see eye to eye on that, right up front, that is the biggest thing that'll kill a potential relationship. But we both knew early on that, that a family was in the cards. So, I love kids. She's a teacher. So, so she loves kids sometimes.
Sometimes, right. I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eric. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of both of the podcasts, The Spiel and the Kingcast, and I can't wait to see what you guys got cooking with this movie stuff, and I'll keep listening to the pods.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And hopefully I didn't get too long-winded there. Like, I swear that my show, I'm a little bit more restrained. I let the guests talk a little bit more on my.
See, and that's what I'm doing, right? You're the guest now, so you get to just talk. That's
now I get to have the verbal diarrhea that all your poor listeners have to wade through. So apologies for that, but yeah, definitely go check out the Kingcast. It's on Kingcast and the Spiel. You can find wherever you get your podcasts. And I did a spin-off show if you like watch along kind of stuff. I did a show for Fangoria watching the Welcome to Derry thing. Me and Brez did a kind of like a little Kingcast spin-off essentially, where we were going episode by episode as they were airing and talking through it. So that's pretty fun. And that one you can find on video. We're slowly figuring out the video side of it. Maybe in 2026 you'll actually get to see our beautiful faces on the Kingcast side of stuff. Yeah.
Awesome.
But thanks so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.